The explosion rattled the windows of Outpost Vega, the remote medical facility located on the edges of Keplerian space. Kendrick was halfway through his morning coffee when the emergency alarm blared. As the only human physician stationed on this alien medical outpost, he knew whatever was coming through those doors would test the limits of both his medical training and his diplomatic skills. Dr. Kendrick to Emergency Bay 1, the automated system announced in multiple languages. Orbital crash survivors incoming. Lucas abandoned his coffee and sprinted down the sterile white corridor, his lab coat flapping behind him. The outpost was staffed mainly by Zareths, tall, blue-skinned aliens with 6 fingers on each hand and an encyclopedic knowledge of xenobiology. They were brilliant doctors, but sometimes struggled with species they rarely encountered like humans. Dr. Marek, the Zareth chief of emergency medicine, intercepted Lucas at the bay doors. His translucent blue skin pulsed with stress patterns. A commercial transport vessel collided with a cargo ship in low orbit, Marek explained, his translator converting his high-pitched language to English. The escape pods malfunctioned. The transport broke apart on descent. We have 3 confirmed survivors being brought in now. Lucas nodded, pulling on surgical gloves. Species? 2 Eltarians and 1 Vexian, Marek replied. The rest of the passengers didn't make it. Before Lucas could respond, the emergency bay doors hissed open. Medical drones flew in, carrying 3 stretchers. Lucas felt his heart sink. The injuries were catastrophic. The first 2 patients were Eltarians, reptilian humanoids with scaled skin and elaborate crests. Both were unconscious, with severe burns covering most of their bodies. Multiple fractures were evident even to an untrained eye. The third patient, a Vexian with crystalline skin and 4 arms, appeared to have suffered the worst damage. The crystalline structure that made up their exoskeleton was shattered in multiple places. The medical team sprang into action. Lucas joined Dr. Zara, a junior Zareth physician, at the first Eltarian's bedside, while Marek and 2 others attended to the Vexian. Vital signs critical but present, Zara reported, scanning the Eltarian with a medical tricorder. Multiple fractures to the skeletal structure, 3rd-degree burns over 60% of the body, and significant internal bleeding. Lucas checked the readings, mentally converting the alien biological markers to something his human medical training could interpret. Start fluid replacement and prepare for emergency surgery. We need to stop the internal bleeding before addressing the burns. The medical bay buzzed with activity as the teams worked frantically to stabilize the 3 crash victims. Hours passed in a blur of procedures, each more desperate than the last. Lucas moved between the 2 Eltarians, applying his knowledge of comparative anatomy to assist the Zareth doctors. 6 hours later, Lucas stood beside Dr. Marek, reviewing the medical scans of all 3 patients. The news wasn't good. The trauma is too severe, Marek said, his voice low and somber. The Vexian's crystal structure is beyond repair. And the Eltarians. He paused, tapping the screen to enlarge an image of damaged internal organs. They've sustained critical damage to multiple vital systems. Their bodies cannot withstand the required surgical interventions. Lucas stared at the scans, unwilling to accept the prognosis. There must be something we can do. Dr. Zara joined them, her skin pulsing with dark blue patterns of distress. We've administered maximum pain relief, but the cellular degradation is accelerating. Based on all medical parameters, this crash was unsurvivable. That they lived long enough to reach us is remarkable. So we're just giving up, Lucas challenged, his voice rising. Marek placed a 6-fingered hand on Lucas's shoulder. Dr. Kendrick, I understand your frustration, but sometimes medical science has limitations. Even with our advanced technology, some injuries are beyond repair. Lucas shrugged off Marek's hand and returned to examining the scans. Something wasn't adding up. The Eltarians' biological systems were similar enough to reptiles from Earth that he could interpret their readings better than the Zareth doctors. Their metabolic shutdown isn't proceeding as I would expect, he muttered, more to himself than to his colleagues. There's a pattern here. Dr. Kendrick, Marek said firmly, we've made our assessment. The patients will be made comfortable for their final hours. The official report will show that no one could have survived such a crash. We've done all we can. Lucas wasn't listening anymore. He was reviewing the Eltarians' genetic information. Something in their DNA was fighting back against the damage. It wasn't enough to save them on its own, but with the right intervention. "I need access to the experimental regeneration unit," Lucas said suddenly. Zara's skin flashed with surprise. "That equipment is still in testing phase. It's not approved for emergency use." "These patients won't survive without it," Lucas argued, "and they won't survive the transfer to a better equipped facility. This is their only chance." Merrick's expression hardened. "The risk assessment." "Forget the risk assessment," Lucas interrupted. "They're going to die anyway. What do we have to lose?" After a tense moment, Merrick nodded reluctantly. "You may use the unit on one patient as a trial, but I must document your insistence against medical advice." Lucas didn't wait to hear more. He hurried to the first Eltarian's bedside, already calculating the adjustments he'd need to make to the regeneration protocol to match Eltarian physiology. The regeneration unit was wheeled in a large cylindrical chamber with biometric sensors and targeted cellular repair capabilities. It had been developed for Xerath physiology, but was theoretically adaptable to other species. "I'll need to modify the settings," Lucas told the technician, fingers flying over the control panel. "Their cellular structure requires a different approach than the standard protocol." For the next hour, Lucas worked to recalibrate the machine, drawing on his knowledge of comparative xenobiology. The Eltarian's condition continued to deteriorate, making the countdown more urgent. "Dr. Kendrick," Merrick said from the doorway, "the second Eltarian has entered multi-system failure." The Vexian passed away 5 minutes ago. Lucas felt a pang of grief, but pushed it aside. "I'm ready. Help me transfer this patient into the chamber." Together with 2 nurses, they carefully moved the injured Eltarian into the regeneration unit. Lucas activated the modified program and watched as the chamber sealed and began to fill with a translucent gel that would deliver the regenerative compounds directly to the damaged tissues. "Now we wait," he said, not taking his eyes off the monitoring screen. Merrick studied the readouts with obvious skepticism. "You've set the cellular regeneration rate much higher than recommended. The risk of mutation is less concerning than the risk of death," Lucas finished. "I've compensated with genetic stabilizers." Hours passed. Lucas refused to leave the monitoring station, even as the other doctors rotated shifts. The second Eltarian's condition stabilized temporarily after Lucas convinced Merrick to authorize emergency surgery, but remained critical. 23 hours after the crash, victims arrived. Lucas was still at his post, bleary-eyed but determined, when the regeneration chamber's alert sounded. The process was complete. "Let's see what we've got," he murmured, initiating the drainage sequence. The gel receded, and the chamber opened. Lucas held his breath as he approached with a medical scanner. The Eltarian's burns had healed substantially, the scales already showing signs of regeneration. The internal bleeding had stopped, and the bone fractures showed significant fusion. "Vital signs stabilizing," Lucas announced, relief washing over him. "Brain activity normal." "We did it." Merrick checked the readings himself, his skepticism giving way to guarded optimism. "This is unexpected. The regeneration appears successful. However, recovery will still take time." "Time they now have," Lucas pointed out, already moving to the second Eltarian's bedside. "I want to transfer this patient to the unit immediately." "Dr. Kendrick," Merrick began hesitantly, "the second patient's injuries are even more severe, and we have no precedent for using the regeneration chamber twice in such quick succession." Lucas stood his ground. "We just created a precedent. Reset the system and let's get them in there." After some debate, Merrick relented. The second Eltarian was transferred into the chamber, and Lucas once again modified the settings to address the specific pattern of injuries. When the regeneration cycle completed 12 hours later, the results were similarly promising. Both Eltarians remained unconscious but stable, their bodies now capable of healing naturally with proper medical support. Lucas finally allowed himself to sit down, exhaustion catching up with him after nearly 2 days without sleep. Zara brought him water and a nutrient pack. "You defied medical consensus," she observed, her skin patterns indicating a mix of admiration and concern. "Sometimes consensus gets it wrong," Lucas replied, rubbing his eyes. The initial assessment was based on Xerath medical models, which don't fully account for Eltarian regenerative capabilities. Merrick joined them, his demeanor more formal than usual. The medical review board has been notified of your unauthorized protocol modifications. There will be an investigation. Lucas nodded wearily. I expected as much. However, Merrick continued, I have included my observation that your intervention appears to have been successful where our standard procedures would have failed. That was as close to approval as Lucas was likely to get from the strict Xerath physician. He accepted it with a nod of thanks. 3 days later, the first Eltarian regained consciousness. Tekka, as they learned his name was, had been a cultural attaché traveling to a diplomatic conference. His recovery progressed steadily, though he required physical therapy to regain full use of his limbs. The second Eltarian, a scientist named Virex, took longer to wake but eventually opened her eyes 5 days after the crash. Her injuries had been more severe, and her recovery would be more prolonged. But the medical team was now confident both would survive. Lucas spent time with both patients each day, monitoring their progress and making adjustments to their treatment plans. He was checking Vrex's neural responses when Merrick entered with several officials Lucas didn't recognize. Dr. Kendrick, Merrick said formally, these representatives from the Interstellar Medical Authority wish to speak with you regarding the treatment of the crash survivors. Lucas straightened, suddenly aware of his rumpled appearance after another long shift. Of course. The lead official, a stern-looking Taurian with gray skin and prominent ridges along her skull, stepped forward. Dr. Lucas Kendrick, I am Director Selna of the Regulatory Division. We're here to review your use of experimental technology and deviation from established protocols during the treatment of these patients. Lucas felt a chill. The Interstellar Medical Authority had the power to revoke his license to practice medicine in Keplerian space. If they ruled against him, he would be sent back to Earth in disgrace. I acted in the best interest of my patients, he said calmly. The standard protocol was insufficient given their specific physiologies and injuries. Director Selna nodded without expression. So, your report indicates, we will conduct interviews with the medical staff and patients, review all logs and scans, and make our determination. The investigation lasted 2 weeks. Lucas continued his duties, but the uncertainty weighed heavily on him. Both Eltarians continued to improve, which bolstered his spirits. Tekka was already walking short distances with assistance, while Vrex had begun speaking again, though her voice remained weak. On the 15th day after the crash, Lucas was summoned to the administrative wing of the outpost. Director Selna sat behind a desk, flanked by her assistants and Dr. Merrick. Dr. Kendrick, she began without preamble. We have concluded our investigation into your treatment of the crash survivors. Lucas stood straight, ready to defend his actions once more if necessary. The official medical assessment immediately following the crash indicated that the injuries sustained were unsurvivable, Selna continued. Dr. Merrick and his team made this determination based on established medical knowledge and protocols. She paused, studying Lucas with her penetrating gaze. However, the evidence clearly shows that your intervention saved 2 lives that would otherwise have been lost. Your understanding of Eltarian physiology and your willingness to attempt an experimental procedure when all standard options had been exhausted demonstrates exceptional medical judgment. Lucas exhaled slowly, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. Therefore, Selna continued, the authority has decided not only to clear you of any procedural violations, but to commend your actions. Furthermore, we are establishing a new protocol for emergency xenobiological intervention based on your approach. Relief washed over Lucas. Thank you, Director. I only did what I believed was right for my patients. Merrick spoke up, his tone respectful. Dr. Kendrick's human perspective provided insights our Xerath medical training did not account for. It was illuminating. Coming from Merrick, this was extraordinary praise. Lucas nodded in acknowledgement, touched by the unexpected support. As the meeting concluded, Director Selna added one final note. The Eltarian Council has requested that you personally oversee the final stages of recovery for both survivors. They have expressed their profound gratitude for your efforts. A week later, Lucas stood in the physical therapy chamber, watching as Tekka completed a series of mobility exercises. The Eltarian scales had regrown with a slightly different pattern, a permanent reminder of his brush with death. "You appear pleased with my progress, Dr. Kendrick," Teka observed, his translator rendering his sibilant speech into clear English. "Very pleased," Lucas confirmed. "Your recovery rate is exceeding expectations." Teka's inner eyelids blinked in what Lucas had learned was a gesture of contemplation. "The others told me that you carried both myself and scientist Rex out of death's grasp when all believed us lost. This is a debt that cannot be repaid." Lucas shook his head. "There's no debt. It's my job to heal. Among my people, saving a life creates a bond," Teka continued. "You are now considered kin to both myself and Vrex. Our families will recognize you as such." The implications of this cultural honor weren't lost on Lucas. Being recognized as kin to high-ranking Eltarians could open diplomatic doors that were usually closed to humans. Later that day, Lucas visited Vrex, who was making slower but steady progress. Her laboratory on her homeworld had already contacted the outpost, eager for her return. "They say I will be able to continue my research," she told Lucas, her voice stronger than the day before. "The nerve damage to my hands is healing better than anticipated." "I'm glad to hear it," Lucas replied, checking her latest scans. "Your fine motor control should return to approximately 95% of pre-injury function." Vrex reached out with a scaled hand, grasping Lucas's wrist with surprising strength. "You did not accept the ruling of your colleagues that we were beyond saving." "Why?" Lucas considered the question carefully. "I saw something in your genetic makeup, a resilience that the others missed, and I couldn't accept giving up while there was still a chance, however small." "This persistence," Vrex said thoughtfully. "Is it a human trait?" "Not exclusively," Lucas smiled. "But we can be stubborn when it comes to accepting limitations." The day the Eltarians were cleared to travel home arrived sooner than Lucas expected. A diplomatic vessel arrived to transport them back to their homeworld, where they would complete their recovery under the care of their own physicians. The outpost staff gathered in the departure bay to bid them farewell. Teka and Vrex, now able to walk without assistance, approached Lucas last. "Dr. Lucas Kendrick," Teka said formally, "the Eltarian Council has extended an invitation for you to visit our homeworld as an honored guest, once your rotation at this outpost is complete." Lucas was momentarily speechless. Humans were rarely invited to Eltaria, a world known for its medical and scientific advancements. "Additionally," Vrex added, "I have arranged for you to have access to our medical archives. Your insight into cross-species treatment could benefit from our research." "I'm honored," Lucas managed to say, genuinely moved by these gestures. As the Eltarians boarded their transport, Dr. Merrick came to stand beside Lucas. "The official report of the incident has been updated," he informed Lucas. "It now states that, while the initial assessment declared the crash unsurvivable based on standard medical protocols, human intervention identified an alternative approach that resulted in 2 survivors." Lucas smiled slightly. "That's accurate. What it fails to capture," Merrick continued, his translator struggling to convey the emotional nuance, "is the lesson for all of us. Different perspectives have value, even perhaps, especially in medical science, where we believe our knowledge to be complete." Lucas watched as the Eltarian ship departed. "I think we all have something to learn from each other." In the months that followed, Lucas continued his work at Outpost Vega, but with a new role. Dr. Merrick appointed him to head a new department focused on cross-species emergency protocols. The experimental regeneration unit was fully certified for emergency use, with Lucas's modifications incorporated into the standard programming. Occasionally, Lucas received communications from Teka and Vrex, updating him on their progress. Both had returned to their respective professions, carrying with them the experience of having survived what was deemed unsurvivable. 6 months after the crash, Lucas received a formal communication from the Interstellar Medical Council. They were establishing a new initiative to improve emergency response protocols for multi-species incidents, and they wanted him to lead it. As Lucas packed his belongings in preparation for his new assignment, he found the original medical report from the day of the crash. The stark assessment, "injuries incompatible with survival," now seemed like a relic from another time. Dr. Zara entered his quarters, her skin pulsing with the blue patterns that indicated curiosity. "You are leaving us to teach others your methods?" Lucas nodded, carefully placing the report in his bag. "Something like that, though I hope to learn as much as I teach." "Before you go," Zara said, "I wish to understand something. The day of the crash, when all of us beings with more advanced medical technology than humans possessed determined that survival was impossible, what did you see that we missed?" Lucas considered the question thoughtfully. "I didn't see anything you didn't. I just refused to accept that what we were seeing was the final word." "Is this wisdom or folly?" Zara asked, genuinely curious. "Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference," Lucas admitted. "In medicine, we're taught to trust evidence, follow protocols, accept limitations, but we're also taught to fight for every patient. Sometimes those principles conflict." Zara's skin rippled in understanding. "And in this conflict, you chose hope over certainty." "I did," Lucas agreed, "and sometimes that makes all the difference." On his final day at Outpost Vega, Lucas received one last surprise. A small Eltarian delegation arrived, including representatives from both Teka's and Rex's families. They presented him with a ceremonial medical emblem inscribed with his name in Eltarian script. "This marks you as a healer of our people," the eldest delegate explained. "It carries significant meaning among all worlds where Eltarians practice medicine." Lucas accepted the emblem with appropriate solemnity. "I will wear it with honor." The story of how a human carried two of our kind out of death's grasp, when our most advanced medical minds declared it impossible, has spread throughout our systems, the delegate continued. "It has prompted much discussion about the nature of medical certainty and the value of diverse perspectives." Lucas smiled, thinking of his initial clash with Dr. Merrick and how far they had come since then. "I hope that discussion leads to better care for all species." As Lucas boarded the transport that would take him to his new assignment, he reflected on how a single emergency response had changed the trajectory of his career and potentially of interspecies medicine itself. From the viewport, he watched as Outpost Vega receded into the distance. Somewhere out there, two Eltarians were alive, who, by all standard medical assessments, should not have survived. Their continued existence wasn't just a testament to Lucas's determination, but to the principle that medical knowledge should never be considered complete or infallible. His new position would allow him to formalize this philosophy into training programs and protocols that might save countless lives across species boundaries. The unsurvivable would become survivable more often. As doctors learned to question their assumptions and consider alternative approaches, Lucas settled into his seat as the ship prepared for faster-than-light travel. He had carried two survivors out of a supposedly unsurvivable crash, but they had carried him somewhere too to a new understanding of his purpose in this vast, diverse galaxy. His communicator chimed with an incoming message. It was from Dr. Merrick. "The Vexian patient," the message read, "the one who did not survive. I have been reviewing your notes and scans. There is a possibility that, with modifications to your regeneration protocol, adjusted for crystalline physiology, perhaps next time we might save 3 instead of 2. Lucas smiled and began composing his reply, already thinking about the challenge ahead. In medicine, as in life, the only true failure was accepting defeat when another path remained unexplored. The ship jumped to faster than light speed, carrying Lucas toward his future, a future where the impossible might just be waiting for someone stubborn enough to try.